Thank you very much for tuning in to That Will Never Work podcast. And today we have someone who wanted to write a book to prove to herself that she could. See, for many, just like herself, writing was a difficult task. And growing up, she wasn't a good student in English, reading, or writing. And she struggled with McGuffey readers, and the phonetic concepts escaped her as a child. And so, for a lot of us who might see something like this as a challenge, she has overcome it. And guess what? She did something that most of us, we don't know how to get to that point. We'll hear more about this after that.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
So, in true form of That Will Never Work, we have Rhonda Parker Taylor. And I said that because when someone tells you you can't read, you can't write, or whatever else, that's not going to happen for you. And so this lady crushed that mentality. Thank you very much for coming on to the show, Rhonda.
Thank you, Maurice, and I'm so glad to be here. We've had such a good relationship work-wise that
Mm-hmm.
we can really learn from each other. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping everybody out there in this audience that's listening pulls up and really thinks, how does your thoughts, your values, and
Mm-hmm.
your behaviors shape how you perceive your intelligence, your
Mm.
abilities, your um, purpose?
Right.
Because when our self-talk and other people's talk influences how we move through and navigate through our own journeys, it limits us if we allow it.
Right.
And I love the introduction that you brought to me of all the things that I'm so proud of. One of them is that I overcame.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't allow circumstances, attitudes, perception, and my own thoughts of self
Mm-hmm.
stop me. I
Mm-hmm.
allowed myself to be vulnerable and I worked through it. And I know we're going to talk about my journey,
Mm-hmm.
but just if all of those people out there can think, experiences can be positive or negative, and it doesn't matter what the world brings to you. It's how we bring it inside our own souls. And that's the main thing. People can say anything,
Right.
or they can put limits on you. But if you choose to unchain yourself,
Mm-hmm.
then you will find that you're through that self-awareness, you can be successful in your own right.
So let me ask, Rhonda, you know, you're talking about how you've overcome, right?
Mm.
And I expressed it in the very beginning. You reiterated it. But what about for those individuals that feel as though they can't, right? Was there anything that you've done specifically that allowed you to get to that point? Because a lot of times, because we're talking about we're going back to basics, right? We're going back to, hey, elementary school, preschool, kindergarten, the whole idea of reading and writing, right? Just the basics. And sometimes we get discouraged by what our teachers might tell us,
Right.
what a school counselor might tell us. And so now you're moving along through life and you're like, hey, can I really get to this point? Can I be a business owner? Can I write a book? So how did you not allow it to get you down, and what helped you to get to this point?
Well, the first thing that I did is I found a mentor. And
Mm.
by the grace of God, a teacher wanted to make sure I graduated and decided to tutor me on the summer between my junior and senior year to make sure that I got the grades that I needed to graduate. And
Mm.
then I that became a pattern. But see,
Mm.
what I didn't do, which I think is part of the reason I was able to thrive after having the mentor,
Mhm.
is I didn't believe what people said,
Mm.
because even the negative, whether it been a teacher that said you're different than the rest of your family, or some of these negative conversations, would come back with, well, you don't know who I am, you don't know my mission, you don't know where I'm going, you don't know. So I was kind of defending who I wanted to be.
Wow.
But then as I got older, I realized the self-talk. You should refrain from using negative towards yourself. If you can't love yourself, how is anybody else going to believe and love you? Example,
Wow.
I can do anything. Okay? Yeah, you can, instead of saying, "Oh, I wish I was smarter."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you might say, "I'm proud of myself," and instead of saying, "Well, I could have tried, but I didn't," or "I'm afraid I'm not going to pass," or "I'm stressed about my life," or whatever those negative. Instead of you turn around and say, "I get better every time I try."
Hmm.
you know if you're worried about, for instance, maybe you're trying to pass a class or get a promotion and you're worried about it, instead of saying that you're not sure you're good enough, you put the statements that are in a positive mindset,
Mm-hmm.
that says something like, "I will do my best every day till they recognize my worth."
Mm-hmm.
So they recognize, you already recognized it.
Hmm.
And by changing from a negative mindset to a positive role of self-talk, then what you're doing is you're pushing yourself forward instead of behind. You do not lose anything if
Hmm.
you've tried and you don't make it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Nothing changes if you don't if the positive outcome doesn't come from it, because you tried and just maybe it wasn't your turn. Look at it as a doctor's office. You're waiting for your name to be called, right? And a person comes in and they say, "It's John's turn." Okay, maybe it wasn't Rhonda's turn that time, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't have anything to do with the effort that I put in. So when you change that mindset, you're capable of rebounding, having resilience, either getting, back up. They say in Proverbs, the
Hmm.
faithful fall 7 times and get up.
Wow.
So where do we get our teachings and our thoughts? Well, yeah, we can get it biblically, but also we have to put it in practice. And finding out how to do that, you might have to do some research. You might have to, you might have to say, "How do I change negative talk to positive talk?" My sister even busted me one time.
Hmm.
I had a publisher for Crossroads that, we were ready to go, and they pulled the contract. After 2 years of editing, 2 years of getting, working to get it out the door, and they pulled the contract at the end. So it sat for a while. One day she said, "When are you going to do something with that, all your writing?"
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
made every excuse in the book. Of course, I had that fear of
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability again. I didn't want to go through it again.
Right.
And when I gave all the excuses of all the clients I was helping with their projects, and she said, "No, if they were their projects, it would already be on the market."
Mm-hmm.
And I was, okay. Well, big sisters don't know anything. And you are fearful of being vulnerable. You have to change that around.
Hmm.
And she was right. My self-talk, because of that being let down, stopped me. I just put it aside, went on to something else.
Hmm.
I didn't get back up at first. I did finally.
Wow.
You're talking about me being a best-selling author, and
Mm-hmm.
and at this point, but it's all about how we talk to self and others around us. And when we don't put positive in the air, we're not only are we not embracing self, we're not
Mhm.
embracing our own faith, because that means we do not believe.
Right.
It means that we don't have, we're not building our own inner strength so that we can bounce
Mm,
back up.
wow.
That means that we don't have the faith in ourselves to pick ourselves back up.
Rhonda, like, Rhonda. So here's the thing, right? Now, I'm doing that because you've said quite a few different things that I think a lot of us might be dealing with, right?
Oh, yeah,
One, you talked
really. Yeah.
about one, you talked about that belief in self. Sometimes we don't understand what that really is. And
Mm-hmm.
so where it's a little difficult for us to talk within ourselves, to talk to have a conversation in the mirror, right? Sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to see that and
Right.
be honest with ourselves. So a lot of times we find validation on the outside,
Right.
right? The other part that you mentioned, and this is what, that I had challenges with myself personally, which is, well, I had challenges with the first one, but the second one is the fear of success as well.
Mm-hmm.
I
Definitely.
want to help everybody else, right? Hey, I can help them out, and it gives me the appearance of success, right? Because I'm helping everybody else. But like you said, Rhonda, hello, knock, knock, knock. What
Yeah.
about you? What about you? Use your talents and your gifts and your graces for yourself. How do you talk to someone that might be or might be struggling with that fear of success for their own personal selves versus masking it by giving out everything that they have, emptying out their own container, if you will?
But the very first thing is you have to realize your own worth, self reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Where are your values for self? What are they? Do you have an affirmation that you can call upon on yourself? A great example is a person that is taking a test.
Mm-hmm.
And they have fear that they're not going to pass.
Yeah.
And then I actually had this with one of my clients recently, and they were taking the test and they're like, I'm just right there, but I keep on missing, and I keep on missing all the questions that I changed the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I said, then quit changing the answers.
Hmm.
It's your self doubt that is making you fall for what they call in testing, which is the distractor. So you see the distractor answer, and you see the right answer, and you pick the right answer, and the distractor makes you second guess yourself,
Hmm.
and you change it, and then you miss it, and then you're not going to pass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you're in that mode of self and trying to navigate your self acceptance, your your belief that you are worthy of success, you have to set the same kind of plan through deconstructing the negative behaviors you've put
Mm-hmm.
upon yourself throughout your whole life. It could have been started by conversations in a school, at
Mm-hmm.
home, or by a failure you had. It could be anything that started that negative thought process,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to learn to destroy it, deconstruct it, and put it aside and learn from that and not continually repeat it. See, when we're
Hmm.
fearful of success, we repeat the same cycle every single time. We will
Mm-hmm.
find the distractor answer. Oh, you need help moving? I will move you. You need help with a project or a paper? I will help you.
Right.
That distractor. But meanwhile, maybe there's a project that you're trying to finish that you just can't get done because the distraction of someone else's worth, someone
Mm-hmm.
else's progress, someone else's needs. And sometimes they don't even really need you. It's just easier. Hey, I, I would you do this for me? I don't want to have to take off work,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Wow.
Go off and do it. But wait a minute, what about your work? What about your worth? What about your value? What about all of those things your dreams that you had? So it's
Mm-hmm.
not about stopping yourself from helping others, because helping behavior is part of our
Mm-hmm.
existence. It's part of our resilience. It's part of our self actualization. but it is about prioritizing
Mm.
self is most important.
Hmm. So I want to back up a little bit because you said something about uh, the tract or distraction statement within a test, right? And you're
Hmm.
comparing the two, right?
Right.
And I'm using this analogy because a lot of times in life, we get compared to someone else. We get
Exactly.
compared to something else, right? And
Right.
now we're trying to understand how to run our business. We're trying to understand, what book I want to write or, whatever it is, what car to buy or drive. So we're constantly comparing. And a lot of times as we compare ourselves, we don't look as cute, as gorgeous, as sexy as the next thing. So we get kind of confused as to when we're looking at that distraction sentence, one or two words make the situation incorrect, right? But
Exactly.
sometimes we don't understand what that is. So how do we understand and pinpoint that one little word that might be truly throwing us off?
What is your values? What is your purpose? What is your mission? So if it's about you, if we're looking at two comparable situations,
Hmm.
whether it be business wise or whether it be personal, both of them can go into the same thing. What are your views, your values, your behaviors, and your mission? What is your purpose? If it's not within your purpose,
Hmm.
then it's probably not for you.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
distractor is the shiny object that is intended to distract you. Sometimes we
Right.
all need a distraction. Put some TV on
Right. Right. Right.
then. Or find a project or whatever but when we allow the distractor to pull us away from our mission
Hmm. Hmm.
and our purpose, what ends up happening is it leaves us with self-doubt.
Hmm.
Self-doubt, then what ends up happening is it deteriorates everything about our main goals in life. You have to practice kindness, you have to practice honesty, you have to practice all these values that you have.
Hmm.
But if you're just deconstructing yourself and putting self-doubt in it, guess what? You can't be kind because you become angry.
Hmm.
You can't be honest because the truth isn't even within yourself towards yourself because you're not following your mission and your purpose. You can't just demonstrate responsibility and helping behaviors with a smile and enjoy it
Hmm.
because you feel begrudged about the fact that you're helping, but you have this glorious project that has your self worth attached to it or your identity attached to it. And that could even
Hmm.
be family.
Hmm.
you know
Hmm.
Sometimes, you know that's where our desires and our values are founded, and we don't spend enough time with them because we have something else. But then you have this tug of war of power between family and you,
Right.
or it can be family putting pressure on you. This
Right.
is the opposite of you, but you have a mission that's going to benefit you and everybody in the family. But you can't get to it because of the commitments or the distractors, the picnic, the vacation, whatever it might be. Maybe you're supposed to be paying off your bills so you can afford a new business adventure,
Hmm. Hmm.
but yet you just went to Vegas and spent $10,000
Mm.
to make it put a smile on everybody's face.
Wow.
So you've got to think about what are your behaviors, your thoughts, and your values in every one of those life test questions.
Hmm.
Because when you're trained to create a multiple choice question as an educator,
Hmm.
they train you to have two questions that are fairly off base, that people go up, and
Right.
then there's always two: the correct answer and the distractor.
Hmm.
And you have to learn to not follow for the distraction.
Wow.
Have that confidence in self to pick the right answer. Crossroads. I may not have been able to have a best-selling novel had I went with the first publisher, even though they pulled the deal.
Hmm.
I might not have been ready. I definitely wouldn't have had the endorser of
Hmm.
Merrill Hemingway because it was the second publisher that made the introduction.
Hmm.
So it's just like that example of the doctor's office. My name was called, and then they're like, oh, sorry, we're going with John.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong person. You're going to Dr. Van Sock, and this was Dr. Mabel. And so I had to sit back down. But when my name was called, the second publisher or the second doctor had fingers out there in the world that allowed me to get Merrill Hemingway as an endorser.
Wow.
So timing is things, stepping up to your own values. And like you said, not falling for the distractor. What if I had decided I'm going to go back a different route, maybe self-publishing?
Mm-hmm.
Which I can, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it in another book right now. Do I self-publish it? Yeah, I'm going through the same conversation, with myself. But it's all about finding what your mission, your value, and your purpose is, and can your whether it be your business or your personal life, can you bring yourself to market?
Mm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
are you going to distribute yourself in the proper ways to as a person or in your business? Are you going to be intelligent and self-aware enough to know what your behaviors, your values, your thoughts are going to do?
So Rhonda, all I could do is just nod my head and smile. Because of you've touched on a lot of different things of you mentioned in the last moment, self-awareness, right?
Mm,
There's something else that another key word that came to mind was how to get over others' expectations of me, right?
mhm.
You know, and a lot of this has to deal with looking in the mirror, being able to communicate with myself and being honest with myself. And a lot of times some of us don't want to do this. So Rhonda, if someone needs to talk to you because they see what you bring to the table, because I don't know how to talk to myself, and I need someone to coach me through the process, right? So, Rhonda, where can someone find you if they need to get over expectations of others? Even if I gotta get over expectations of myself, because sometimes I might set the bar to a place that's really unreachable, right? As well, because sometimes we do that as well. So,
Mhm.
where someone could reach out to you and talk to you about these type of things?
They can go to my website, rhondaparkertaylor.com. I try to make it easy. Just remember Rhonda's with an H, and it has my email on there. It has all my social media. And let's engage and let's become better at the pillars of resilience of our lives. And when you can do that
Mm-hmm.
through mindfulness and through self awareness and through self actualization, what ends up happening is you
Wow.
have and enhanced, oh my god, tongue tied, enhanced understanding of self and others, where you can handle conflict easier and you can make decisions better and enhance your goals where everybody is attaining it in your orbit.
Wow. Um, Rhonda, we can go on for another 25 hours of talk about this stuff. But of course, all the information that you provided will be in the show notes.
Sure.
So all your links and everything will be there. So if you're walking, running, jogging, whatever it might be, flying to Mars, I don't know what you're doing, whenever you get a chance to sit down, please click on the links and you can follow Rhonda and get all the information that she has, including her book, Crossroads. But Rhonda, I do have one last question before you walk
Sure.
away. My would you rather question, Rhonda. Would you rather choose three doors or a fork in the road?
That's a good question because that's kind of an analytical. Choose between three doors and a fork in the road. I think I would go with the fork in the road because I'd want to be able to cheat and see kind of what's going on each side a little bit and say, okay. But just like Merrill Hemingway said when she read my book, There all comes a point when we hit a crossroads.
Mm.
We have to choose and decide. So no matter how much peeking and how much cheating I try to do, I have to make a decision because even chocolate has an expiration date.
I didn't know that part. That's funny. That's funny. But, Rhonda, I thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And everybody have a great day. It's springtime now. Yay.
Yes, most
For all of
definitely.
us in the colder climates and enjoy your life.
Most definitely. And thank you very much for listening to That Will Nevr Work podcast. And I will talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?